Welcome to Hildestone College's quick lesson series where our teachers give you some English language tips.
Hello and welcome back to Quick Lessons. Today we're going to look at how to use commas correctly. I really wish that I had a penny for every time I've been asked this question. It's a really common problem. Okay, first, this is the only grammatical use of a comma. In the other cases, it's just to make reading easier. Okay, so this is the only time where a comma is grammatically necessary. And it's in what are called non-defining relative clauses. Now, relative clauses are the ones which start with who or which. You've probably seen them lots of times. And if they're non-defining, then it means that they don't tell us who or what is being talked about. They just add extra information about that thing. So there are always two parts to the sentence in that case. Let's have a look at an example. Broadstairs is a popular tourist destination and famous for its sandy beaches. So we've got two sentences there joined by and is what we call a conjunction. Now that's a correct sentence, but we could combine those two sentences a different way. For example, like this: Broadstairs, which is a popular tourist destination, is famous for its sandy beaches. And equally, you could say it this way: Broadstairs, which is famous for its sandy beaches, is a popular tourist destination. Now, which of those you use just depends on what you want to emphasize, what the main information is, and then what the extra information is within the two commas. It might help you to think of commas like brackets which separate off extra information. Okay, so that's a grammatical reason for using a comma. Now we're going to go on to the ones which just make sentences easier to read. And the easiest of those is in lists. The thing to remember here is it's important that you have the same parts of speech if you want to write elegantly. So, for example, when you're ordering your full English breakfast, you could say, I would like sausage, bacon, beans, mushrooms, black pudding and a fried egg for breakfast, please. And if you wrote it down, you would have a comma between each of the nouns. Equally, you can do it with verbs and verb phrases. So, for example, you might read something like this in a novel. He came in, took off his coat, smiled, poured a cup of tea, and then sat down. So you can see there we have commas between the verbs in the list. Now, I said at the beginning it's important that you have the same parts of speech. Of course, we don't always do that when we're speaking, but it's not considered good style to mix parts of speech in a list when you're writing. Okay, so if you're doing exam writing, which is why I imagine you're watching this video, don't mix your parts of speech in a list. Okay, let's look at the next time where we use commas then, and that's if a sentence starts with what's called an adverbial or an adverbial phrase. Now, don't worry, that's a big word, but you will recognize these when you see them. Let's look at a couple of examples. As soon as it stops raining, we'll go down to the seafront. Despite what he says, he's actually a very good pianist. So there you can see before the main subject in the main part of the verb, the we or the he, we have an extra part of the sentence that wouldn't make sense on its own. You couldn't just say, as soon as it stops raining, because the next question would be, well, what? And equally, you couldn't say, despite what he says, because you need the next part of the sentence, and that's marked with a comma. Now, there are some less clear examples, like these. Nowadays, learning English is much easier because of the internet. However, studying in Britain is the best way to learn. Now, you might not agree with the content of those sentences, but equally, you might not agree with those commas. And it is true that when you have a short phrase, and in this case you can see it's just one word, you don't have to use a comma. Now, I'm a little bit old-fashioned. I like a comma there. The sentence looks a bit empty without one, but even I have to admit that it's not wrong to leave a comma out there. And this is why you will see some variation with these. It's not a rule that you need a comma there. It's just that some people do, like me, and some people don't. Okay? Let's go on to our next example when we need a comma. And that's also a little subjective because it's if the sentence flow is interrupted. The thing to remember here is that commas make a sentence easier to read by showing which phrases go together. Now, I've got a couple of very contrived, very artificial sentences here just to demonstrate to you what I mean. So I've made these a little tricky on purpose. Look at this first example. Now, I expect you needed to read that twice, didn't you? Wouldn't it have been easier if I'd written it like this? The moment he returns, you must, I insist, ask him. We've got a kind of interjection here. Okay, we have our instruction, you must, which comes after the adverbial phrase. You probably noticed that you couldn't just say the moment he returns, because you need to know what comes next. So that's like the last examples we looked at. You must ask him is the instruction. I insist is my emphasis, saying how much, how important it is to me that you do this. And it's what's known as an interjection. It's something I put into the sentence to make it sound stronger. It's not part of the main sentence. It's not part of the meaning. But it adds my opinion to it. So we put commas around it. A slightly easier example is this one. Students, however, often find the lack of a rule difficult. They find it difficult that there's not a rule, in other words. And there you can see we've got however in the middle of a sentence. Then we tend to put commas around it because it does interrupt the flow of the sentence. Okay, here are some common mistakes. See if you can correct them. Okay, for the first one, I hope you corrected it this way. Let's look at the next one. Now, this one also affects sometimes the way people speak. I sometimes hear students saying it wrong because they actually say it in such a way that I can hear the comma. I like both tea and coffee. And it sounds really strange in English because we would actually say, I like both tea and coffee. I like both tea and coffee. See, there's no pause after the both because there's no comma. And the last one. So you can see no comma before that. Okay. Now the most common mistake of all is in formal writing, where people write something like this: I like learning English. It's a useful language. And of course it should be, I like learning English because it's a useful language. Or you could use another conjunction there. You could even use and, actually. But in writing, you can't join sentences with a comma. It's okay in speaking, not in writing. So I hope that helps you with commas. Have fun practicing, and I'll see you again soon for another quick lesson. Bye.
Thank you for watching. If you like the video, please click on the like button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe and click the bell icon so that you don't miss the next video. That's it for this lesson. Until next time, goodbye.